Okay, we got up to Eish Daled. Now the Rebbe is going to tie all this back into the miracles of Hanukkah. Meaning, obviously, we started there, and we've been explaining that the whole way through. But we're now going to bring it back to Hanukkah, and there's an interesting question that we have to deal with. That third level is the level of the ultimate in Mesiras Nefesh, the ultimate in self-sacrifice. And we learned that in our previous Maimer, right? We managed to get 2 Hanukkah Maimarim done. Right? So, that experience of a Zoiv and Nit Andrish, it's this way and there is no other way, that was definitely the impetus for the war. Why did the Chashmonaim actually go to war? Mesiras Nefesh. And Mesiras Nefesh of the highest level, the Rebbe told us. And again, in the previous, in Tana Rabbanan, which we finished whenever we finished it, Monday, right, last week. Yeah? Okay. So now that's very interesting because we're if you look up there, we're saying the war is shaykh to a level of Yichud Tata, and yet what we learned, and it's not that that's the Maimer that we finished last week is the only place in the Chassidus that says this is what Chassidus says about Hanukkah, that the whole Inyan of Hanukkah is Mesiras Nefesh from the essence of the soul, such that the Chashmonaim reveal the level of light completely and totally beyond the natural order, and that's what brought about the victory in the war, and that's what brought about the finding of the Bach Shemin, and that's what brought about the miracle of the Bach Shemin. So we have to line that up, what we learned in our previous Maimer, with this, because this seems to say that there are 3 distinct levels, and it seems that so to speak, the level of Elokus revealed in the first in the Milchama is the level of Yichud Tata, the level relative to finding the Pach Shemin is Yichud Law, and the level of the Shemin burning 8 days, that's the only level that's shaykh to the level of what we're calling Etzem, essence. Right? And yet, we just learned a Maimer that says, no, the whole thing is an explosion of Etzem and Neshama. Mesiras Nefesh is coming from the highest place. So, how does this all work? Yeah? Is that a reasonable problem that those of us who learned the previous Maimer should have, having just learned what we learned? Right? This is all amazing, what we've learned in the last 3 OCS. I hope you appreciate what the Rebbe did here. Right? This is pretty astounding. Okay. But it does seem to contradict on a certain level what we learned before, that it's all Mesiras Nefesh from the highest level. Meaning it's all the third level. So then, what are the first two? And how do they have anything to do with Chanukah? Okay. Now, obviously they do. So we have to figure that out. Umamshir b'mayim. So first the Rebbe deals with a certain, this idea, but within the context of Neres Chanukah in general, just the halachas of Neres Chanukah. Umamshir by which we're starting, tomorrow night we're lighting our first lich, which is quite astounding. Mamshir b'mayim. It continues in the Maimer. Of course, the Frierdiker Rebbe, what year was the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer said? No.
Oh.
Okay, look at the top of this page.
1937.
Okay, you're fair. And in real numbers, what was that? Taf Reish Tzadi Ches, right? Okay, 5698, right? And how do you know? Well, it's 50 years before this. Just do the math, right? Just take 50, because the Rebbe said at the beginning of the Maimer, this is the 50th anniversary of that Maimer. 1937. So 1937 means the Frierdiker Rebbe was saying it in Poland. The Frierdiker Rebbe was in Poland for most of the 30s. Right? He spent his whole life in Russia up until that point. He was 50 years old. But as Rebbe, he spent 10 years in Russia, basically 10 years in Russia, 10 years in the Soviet Union. 10 years in the Soviet Union, 10 years in Poland, and 10 years in America. Okay? It was a little less than 10 years in Poland. It was basically the 20s in Russia, the 30s in Poland, and the 40s in America. I passed away in 1950. Previous. Okay. The previous Rebbe continues in his Maimer. Hagam sheneres Chanukah. Now this we all know. Most of this page we know because we learned it in our previous Maimer. Hagam sheneres Chanukah, that even though neres Chanukah tiknum were established, mipnei hanes, because of the miracle shaya b'neres hamikdash that was in the neres of the mikdash, right? A miracle happened at the time of Chanukah, that Aleph, we found Shemen, and base, we lit that Shemen, and that Shemen happened, that Shemen burnt in a miraculous way, however that miracle happened, all the different positions as to how the miracle happened, but the oil burnt in a miraculous way. And where was this happening? In the menorah, in the base of Mikdash. And there's a basic rule that we saw also in Tana Rabbanan, the Maimon we finished, but called the Tikkun Rabbanan Ke'ein D'Oraisa Tikkun, that whenever the Chazal, whenever the Rabbanim make a halacha, when they establish tikkun, they establish a halacha, they look to Torah guidelines upon which to base that halacha. So now, if we're producing a halacha, a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, to commemorate the miracle that happened with the menorah, well, we have pretty clear Torah guidelines as to how to light a menorah and where to light a menorah. Pretty clear. Torah tells us. We know exactly where the menorah was in the base of Mikdash. In Tana Rabbanan, to jog your memory, where did the Rebbe quote this idea of things are established based on Torah guidelines? Which question did the Rebbe ask by quoting this? Remember?
In the previous mimer?
In the previous mimer. Anybody remember?
Oh, how do we get the lighting from the Mizbeach?
No. Time.
Oh.
Why do we light at a different time? That's when the Rebbe quoted this Maimer Chazal. Right, about the when Chazal established a halacha, they established it upon Torah guidelines. Because that was one of the questions that we asked. That was our fifth question, right? Why is it that if the menorah was lit an hour and a quarter before sunset, do we light our menorah at sunset? I think we should just light it. We're commemorating a miracle that happened with the menorah in the base of Mikdash, so we should light it at the time they lit the menorah in the base of Mikdash. Right? Okay. What's the answer to that question? Ooh, you see what happens when you don't review a mimer? That what? Persuma nis, okay, but say that. Why can't that be mefarsim the nes at 3:15 in the afternoon and have it last all the way through? First question the Rebbe answered right in the beginning of the mimer.
Publicizing the miracle.
That's what Izzy just said. He just said it in Hebrew or in Aramaic instead of right. Illuminating the dark. Hanukkah is all about illuminating the dark. That was the first thing the Rebbe told us once he started answering the questions. You have to review the mimer, or else you don't remember it. It's chaval not to remember it. Now, even if you review it once, there'll be things you forget, but there'll be more things you remember. Right? The one thing, if you want to remember a mimer, how do you remember a mimer? Basically, I don't mean saying it off by heart, but how do you remember a mimer? Remember the questions and remember the answers. Then you remember the mimer. I know that mimer. The Rebbe asked this question, this question, this question, and this question, and the answers were azoi, zoi, zoi, zoi. That's it. I now know that mimer, right? Do I remember exactly the order and exactly how that worked, exactly what mimer Chazal the Rebbe quoted as an no. Okay, but do I remember the mimer? Yeah, basically. Okay, so called the Tikkun Rabbanan Ke'ein D'Oraisa Tikkun, that when the Rabbanan make a decree regarding any particular behavior, so they're going to look to the Torah as a source for how to express that. Now, sometimes it's going to be very conceptual, sometimes it's going to be absolutely in line with what was done. So here we have a menorah in the base of Mikdash with all sorts of halachas regarding that menorah, where it was placed, when it was lit, how many candles. So you think if I'm going to celebrate a miracle with that menorah, well, how many candles would I have in my menorah if I'm celebrating a miracle with the menorah in the base of Mikdash? What would be the most reasonable thing? 7. That's what it had. Where would I place it? Well, wherever the menorah in the base of Mikdash was placed. When would I light it? Well, whenever it was lit. Okay, Seder. So we of course don't because we're Jewish. Why not? Mikol Mokim. Ein chalukim, they're different, becoming yonim in a number of things. So some of these you've seen, some of them, one in particular, we have not seen. Right? We didn't see it in Tana Rabbanan. The menorahs of the Mikdash ayu zayin neres, which you all just mentioned. Right? The menorah in the base of Mikdash had 7 candles. Right? B'makam amidasa, and where was it? B'doran. It was in the south, which is Yamin. Right? On the right. Right? Okay. V'neiros Chanukah, Heim Shmeina. Right? They are 8, which is not 7. Umakim Amidasan. Where do you put the menorah? In the doorway, a menorah goes on which side? On the left, opposite the mezuzah. The mezuzah is on the right, the menorah is on the left.
That's because the mezuzah is on, huh?
Oshikein Oshelo. It's on the left. Yes, the Gemara says the mezuzah is on the right and it's on the left, but that's not our issue right now. We just want to know where the menorah is. It's on the left, right? It's on the left of the door. Okay. The first famous mimer of the Rebbe Rashab explains that dafka. Why is the mezuzah on the right and the menorah is on the left? The Rebbe is going to say something along the lines of that, right? But that's not our issue right now. I mean, it might be our issue. Let's see if the Rebbe makes that our issue. Right? If the Rebbe makes it our issue, it's our issue. Right? Okay. So the menorah is in the base of Mikdash is on the right, and the our menorah is on the left. Va'in Yinu, Rebbe says something really quite astounding. K'mavur b'maimer, as is explained in the Maimer. The milchamas ha'yavonim, and again, this is a review from our previous Maimer. The milchamas ha'yavonim, the war against the Greeks, the war of the Greeks against us. Haisa milchama ruchnis, was a spiritual battle. What were they interested in? Well, they're interested in what we learn in Alanisim. They tell us, the Alanisim tells us what they were interested in. Lashkichem terasecho, to make them, the Jewish people, forget terasecho, and of course in our previous Maimon, the Rebbe explained very clearly what that was all about, that they should make us forget that the Torah is your Torah. Learning Torah, the Greek has no problem with learning Torah, as he mentioned numerous times, there's a Talmud department in every major university. He just doesn't want you to think that the Torah has anything to do with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's just interesting intellectual information. It has nothing to do with you, the Eibishter. And what else did they want to do? Lavira michukedet seinecho, from the statutes of your will. So again, we saw very, very clearly in Tana Rabbanan, two different levels of that. On one hand, statutes, which are obviously those halachas which do not resonate in human intellect. So the Greek has a very hard time with that. Right? And ritzonecha, even those mitzvahs that do resonate in human intellect, ultimately called mishpatim, ultimately the true source of that mitzvah is the ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is beyond intellect. Right? And so the reason we do what we do, or we don't do what we don't do, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us either to do it or not to do it, is not because it makes sense to us, but because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us not to do it. Right? And on a deeper level, the Rebbe explained to us, if you remember, in Ois Dalet, very important idea, that even those things that for whatever reason do happen to resonate down, those expressions of God's will, which do happen to resonate down and are clothed in human intellect, we certainly have to have the understanding that in no way, shape, or form can I really think that my limited human understanding is the same as God's infinite understanding. Meaning the reason that the Eibishter says don't murder is not the same as the reason you and I understand murder is unreasonable. Right? You and I understand the reason of that mitzvah based on finite human intellect. God understands, so to speak, the reason of that mitzvah, meaning that will of God descends down into the chokhmah, into the intellect of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, and obviously that infinite intellect does not see it the same way you and I do it. Why would I assume it does? I don't know how infinite intellect understands reality. I assume differently than finite intellect. Okay, so even if I do understand the reason, that's not the real reason. Okay, that's just the reason that human intellect can understand. And just a point that's an incredibly important point that we're going to review for those who have never heard it. We're going to say it for the first time. Those who didn't hear it in Shir last time, they might have heard it somewhere else. It'll be a review for everybody, hopefully. But it's just such an important thing, and it helps us appreciate what Torah is really all about. The only reason you and I understand certain mitzvahs is because the Torah calls them mishpatim. They're not called mishpatim because we understand them. We understand them because they're called mishpatim. What came first, Torah or your intellect?
Torah.
So the Torah calls this mitzvah mishpat. Okay, that means it's going to, the human being that is going to come as a result of God, so to speak, looking in the Torah and creating the world, So that world down there is going to reflect that reality that exists in the Torah. Therefore, not murdering is going to be something that people understand intuitively. Why? Because the Torah calls it a mishpat. It's not called a mishpat because you and I understand it intuitively. We understand it intuitively because it's called a mishpat in the Torah. Therefore, we don't understand kashrus intuitively. Why? Because it's called a chayk. And if it were called a mishpat, then I would understand intuitively why milk and meat don't go together. I don't. Why not? Because the Torah says it's a chayk. So I don't understand. I don't understand why wool and linen don't go together. Right? Why? I don't know. Something human intellect would understand intuitively if the Torah called that a mishpat. But the Torah calls it a chayk, so I don't. Okay. So the Greek finds everything that we just talked about absolutely, he's allergic to it. The idea that there's something beyond human intellect drives him crazy. And by virtue of this, what happened temporarily? There was a great hitgabrut is overcoming, but what overcame what? The darkness of the other side overcame the light and kedusha of Beis Hamikdash and Yidden. So the Greeks were winning for a while. She'ikr yinikasei, and what is the basic nourishment of this negative reality? Humikava smol is from the left side, the side of concealment. Right side is the right is revelation, chesed, and the left is gvura, concealment. So where did the power of the Greeks come from? Klipa, the klipa of gvura de klipa. That's where their power came from, the left side. Okay. Yeah? Say there? Okay. V'lochein, therefore, when they emerged victorious, they overcame the kingship of the house of the Chashmonaim, and they defeated the Greeks. So what did they do? Tiknu Neres Chanukah. So we saw the next year, those of you who learned the Gemara, it says Lashana Cheres. The next year, so we established Chanukah, a holiday. Not that year, the next year. The next year, Chanukah was established. Purim, the parties happened right away. Right? Hanukkah was the next year. Why? So again, this is all review. We saw this in Tana Rabbanan, in order to illuminate the light, the darkness. So somehow the whole idea of Ner Hanukkah is to illuminate the darkness of the Greek. So how do you illuminate that darkness? So that's what we learned in Tana Rabbanan. It has to come from the 8th level, a level beyond nature. Right? So why? Because that level of darkness is a level of darkness that can exist in nature. If I want to completely obliterate that level of darkness, and not only obliterate the darkness, but illuminate the darkness, so then the light has to come from a level that's beyond the dark. Because if it's a light that's relevant to the natural world, well, what can happen to the level of light that's relevant to the natural world? It can be darkened. What about a light that's beyond that? Can't be darkened, and not only can it not be darkened, it can ultimately illuminate the natural world. That's going to be the 8th level. That's Hanukkah. It's an 8-day holiday. That's what we learned. That's Tana Rabbanan. That's just a review of everything we learned in the previous Myra that we learned. So the first thing we did was we lit licht to illuminate the dark. But what kind of candles are going to illuminate the dark? Okay, we've already got the 8. And where are you going to put it? Oh, let's see. V'lochein, therefore, tiknu shmeina neres. There's specifically 8 candles. And of course, again, in Tana Rabbanan, we asked the question about that. What was the question about 8 that all of the Rishonim asked?
Why 8?
Why not?
Because it was a 7.
It's fair, because the miracle of the oil was actually a 7-day miracle, not an 8-day miracle. It was enough oil for 1 day. So there was only 7 days of miracles, so theoretically it should be a 7-day holiday. Okay, what were this is the 3rd or 4th or 5th time we've gone through this, Baruch Hashem. Okay, what were the 3 basic answers in the Rishonim? Who remembers?
Rambam war.
Rambam said we celebrate the war for the extra day.
Ritva 1/8 of the oil.
Right, beautiful. The Ritva said that we only lit 1/8 of the oil every day, so there was a miracle every day because it lasted all night, even though it shouldn't have. Right? And the Miri says, beautiful. We found the Pach Shemen.
And
Right?
the Rebbe says that.
The Rebbe, that was a different, 100%. The Rebbe, the problem of 8 is not solved by what the Rebbe says. It's created. It's just created on the 8th day instead of the first day. Right? Because theoretically, the way the Rebbe describes it in that Sikha that we talked about, right? So the Rebbe says that we lit the oil the first night, and it's not that it burnt down and miraculously there was oil in the candle the second night. But no, that oil burnt all night, but it didn't. It burnt, but it didn't burn. Right? And it was there. It's just there the whole time. Nothing happened to it. Okay, like the Aron. Okay, and like the candle of Rivka and Sarah, the dough of Rivka and Sarah. Okay, so then the problem becomes the 8th night. First night, unbelievable miracle. Still here. The oil's still here. Second night, same thing. 8th night. The oil doesn't have to be here at the end of the 8th night. It can burn. Why?
Because you
There's
found
new
oil
stuff.
and
There's
stuff.
new stuff. There's the whole barrel sitting over there waiting for tomorrow. Did it burn again that all night? Okay, so what do we do with that oil? The 8th night is an interesting question relative to the way. I mean, that's what you have to explain according to the Rebbe's understanding of it all. Hmm? Not that it's not explainable. It's just, but the Rebbe doesn't go there in the Sefer. It's right, but you have to deal with that somehow. But everybody has to deal with it, except the Ritva. But that's the Ritva, which is so interesting. The Ritva is a Sephardi Rishon. He came from the school of the Ramban. Basically, that shalshelet, that chain is the Ramban, the Rashba, and the Ritva. And the Ritva wrote Chedushim and Shas that are, the Sefer, you can find it in Zal, and you should find it on your own bookshelf. The Ritva writes usually a very unique pshat in the Gemara, and often the simplest and most straightforward pshat in the Gemara. Once you read the Ritva, you go, why did anybody else say that? That's so straightforward. That's so simple. Such a nice pshat. Right? It's incredible pshat in the Gemara. Meaning, if you're on the side of the page, that's what everybody would learn. He's not on the side of the page. He's a different book. But he's not. Now, sometimes he deals with very conceptual issues, which is what the Sephardi Rishonim dealt with to a great degree. Right? Much or most of the action in understanding sugyas conceptually is happening with the great Sephardi Rishonim from the school of the Ramban. But he also says just beautiful, simple pshat in the Gemara. It's amazing, the Ritva. Right? That actually, if you're Sephardi, you call him the Ritba. Ashkenazim call him the Ritva, and Sephardim call him the Ritba. Now, I guess they're right, but that doesn't mean we're going to change our pronunciation. Right, wrong. It's not, If you hear someone say the Ritba, it's the same person. You'll find them find this book by the Rishonim in the Zal. Okay, so when we won, what did we do? The first thing we did, Shemayin Neres. Why? Now we know why. We learned this in Ner Chayik, Tana Rabban in Ner Chayik. The Shmeina hu l'mayla mi'ishtalshlus. 8 is a number beyond the natural order. And ki bichdei, in order, laharis achoshech, in order to illuminate the incredibly powerful darkness of the Greek, who dafkal yedei or shelamayla mi'ishtalshlus. It's specifically through that level of light that's beyond the natural order. The natural order, that level of light, can be darkened by the Greek. Right? What's that in Veata? What did the Rebbe say? What was that all in Veata? How do you defeat the Greek? Not by having a debate with the Greek. Because then you're on his playing field. Right? Now that doesn't mean that what you say is less reasonable than what he says, or is actually probably more reasonable than what he says. Okay, fine, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because as long as you're dealing with the Greek intellectually, so then the Greek has what to say. Right? Is what he's saying as true as what you're saying? Obviously not, but who cares? The old saying, no one wins an argument. Right? No one wins an argument. both people are going to walk away from the argument with entrenched in exactly the same position they had when they started the argument. Right? That's the way most arguments work. Famous story. Velvel Green. Velvel Green was a scientist, worked in NASA, was involved in the space program, lived in Minnesota. Why did he live in Minnesota if he worked for NASA? I never quite understood that, but he lived in Minnesota. Never quite got that, but he worked for NASA. He must have had something over there, or some, but he lived in Minnesota, and he was coming close to Yiddishkeit through the famous Rabbi Feller, who was just one of the most an amazing shaliach. He was a very, very special shaliach, Rabbi Feller, very special person. So he as he was getting closer and closer to Yiddishkeit, so he would write the Rebbe letters with questions about science, because he was a scientist and he knew the Rebbe understands all these things. So he would write the Rebbe these very interesting and sophisticated letters about science. And he told this story in Mayanot when he came to Fabren once. He said the Rebbe would write him back, "It's wonderful to hear from you, and how's your son David doing, and what's he doing this summer, and how's your wife's teaching going?" Ignoring the question. So he'd write back, "Thank you for asking about David. David is now a shaliach in Rochester, Minnesota at the Mayo Clinic. Thank you very much for asking about David. He's actually in summer camp, in the Chabad summer camp, and he's enjoying it very much. And my wife's teaching. The Rebbe told Mrs. Feller to continue teaching, to continue her studies and education, to continue teaching. So, and my wife's teaching is going very, very well. Thank you very much. And then, but I am interested in the answer to the question. I actually have another question." He wrote another question. So Rebbe wrote back, "Oh, so good to hear that David is in camp and that your wife completely," and this went back and forth and back and forth. Till finally he came to Yechidus by the Rebbe. Came to meet the Rebbe. So he came to New York. One of the things he tells about that story, which is funny, he came to New York and he noticed everybody's wearing hats, so he figured he better go into the Rebbe with a hat. So he went in the store and he bought a hat. It was green or orange or something, some funny looking fedora. It wasn't a black hat though. So he went in with the hat and the Rebbe smiled. He said the Rebbe burst out laughing. I'm not so sure about that. The Rebbe, he was probably embellishing the story a little to make it better. The Rebbe smiled and he said to him, "Why are you wearing that ridiculous hat?" So I said, "Why? Everybody's wearing hats." He said, you can take off the hat. It looks funny." Some ridiculous looking hat. Fine, okay. So he took off his hat and he was talking, and he asked the Rebbe during Yechidus, "Why is it that the Rebbe won't answer any of my questions? I have all these very interesting scientific questions and I'm interested in the Rebbe's answer, but the Rebbe never answered." And the Rebbe said an amazing thing to him. The Rebbe said, "My job is not to prove that I'm right. My job is to bring Jews closer to God. I can prove to you that I'm right, but that's not my job. Intellectually, I can prove to you that I can beat you intellectually, but that's not my job. My job is to bring you close to God." Now, Haraya, by asking about his family and showing true interest in him, where did he end up? In Yechidus by the Rebbe. He didn't have to answer the questions to get him into Yechidus, right? All he had to do was just show genuine interest in who he is and what he's all about, right? Which is, the pneumius of it is the etzem and the shama of it all. He has questions, he doesn't have questions, okay. Right? Most people with questions don't have questions. They have answers. Right? They have preconceived notions as to how things work. The Torah says something that contradicts that. I have a question. You don't have a question. You have an answer. And the Torah doesn't agree with your answer. That's not called a question. You have a preconceived notion in terms of how things work, and you're all upset that the Torah doesn't agree with you. God disagrees with me. Oh my gosh, I have a big question. That's not a question. A real question is, wait a minute, I don't understand. In the Maimer Tana Rabbanan, we seem to say that it was all about etzem and neshama. It's all about the essence of the soul. And in this Maimer, we're talking about 3 different levels, and we're saying that only the 3rd level is about the essence. And the other 2 levels are 2 other levels in revealed reality. How does that work? That's a real question. Right? Wait, what the Rebbe says about this disagrees with what I think. That's not a question. It's an answer. Okay. So it's just so, and he ended up, of course, from, right? Rabbi, the Dr. Green, Dr. Velvel Green, and has a bunch of kids and grandkids and great grandkids. I mean, he passed away, But it all worked, right? He told a great story. He was starting to keep kosher, and he flew around a lot. He lectured in places, and so he was on a plane. He was in Chicago. He lives in Minnesota, so Chicago is going to be the airport that every flight goes through. So he was in the Chicago airport. It was late at night. He was extremely hungry. Oh, and they didn't have his kosher food on the plane. So he was hungry. So he said on the plane, I asked for my kosher food. They said they didn't have it. So now on the plane, I couldn't say, okay, give me non-kosher. I just said I want kosher, so I can't say I want non-kosher. Fine. So then I got to the airport, and I was really hungry. So, and I was angry because Rabbi Feller is making me hungry by getting me to this kosher food stuff. So across from me is, a Burger King or I don't know, something in the airport with, glatt treif food. Right? Treif mahadran min mahadran. So he's sitting there in the airport and he calls up Rabbi Feller. Says, Rabbi Feller! This is like 11:30 at night, He feels entitled to wake up the rabbi at 11:30 at night because, hey, the rabbi's the rabbi. And he's my rabbi, so I can do whatever I want. So he called up Rabbi Feller and said, I'm really annoyed at you because I'm hungry and it's all because of you that I can't eat anything. And I'm telling you right now, just so you should know, there's a Burger King, whatever it was. There's a burger place right across from me. And as soon as I hang up the phone on you, I'm going to walk into that burger place and I'm going to eat a nice treif hamburger. I just want you to know that. So you shouldn't feel that you made me hungry. So Rabbi Feller, who's a very special Jew, Rabbi Feller says very calmly, okay, but you should know that the whole history of your family as Jews and you and your descendants is all dependent on whether or not you eat that burger now or not. Have a wonderful evening. And then he hung up the phone. You didn't eat the burger. Very calmly, that's all Rabbi Feller said. Your whole life is dependent on whether or not you eat that burger. I guess he was angry, but he didn't eat the burger. And hasn't had one since. His granddaughter, just last year, married our nephew. They live about 10 blocks, 5 blocks, 8 blocks that way. Just really, it all comes full circle. Everybody marries everybody in the end. Okay. She grew up in Rochester, Minnesota. There's other kids, but this one grew up in Rochester, Minnesota. Okay. So what is it that defeats the Greek? What defeats the Greek is a level beyond nature, not nature. The Greek is all about nature. You're not going to beat the Greek with nature. You're going to beat the Greek by shining a light on the Greek that's so powerful that not only does it obliterate the darkness of the Greek, it illuminates the darkness of the Greek and shows you that the reality that the Greek takes that the Greek worships, called nature, is not separate from the Eibishter, it's actually an expression of the Eibishter. How are you going to do that? From a light that's beyond nature. The statement that's often quoted in Chassidus, Eina aser matir satzmo. A prisoner can't free himself. It has to be someone who's not in prison who can free the prisoner. Okay, so nature, only a level beyond nature can elevate nature and illuminate nature. Nature itself is what it is. Okay, so to illuminate the Greek, you need the level of 8, which is beyond nature, which we saw at great length in Tana Rabbanan. The Shmeinu l'mayla mishtalshlis. Ki b'chtei lahar tzachoshet. 5 lines up. 5 lines up? 5 lines up. Ki b'chtei lahar tzachoshet, in order to illuminate the dark, hu dafka al yedei ha'or shel l'mayla mishtalshlis. This is specifically through the light that is beyond the shtalshlis. And now the Rebbe is quoting exactly the same pasuk that the Rebbe quoted in Tana Rabbanan to teach us the exact same thing. The pasuk is v'havaya yagia choshki. Okay? It's a pasuk in Shmuel base. Okay, now what does it mean? Hashem illuminates my darkness. Okay, but what's interesting? It doesn't say Yud Kei Vav Kei illuminates my darkness. It says the Yud Kei Vav Kei illuminates my darkness. Okay, so now what did we see already in our mimer? Havaya de latata, lower level Yud K Vav K. What is that responsible for? What is that the source of?
Kalim?
Well, it's not Kalim, that's Elohim.
Oh.
So what's it responsible for? The light that shines in natural reality, right? The light, and how do we say that? The map of Seder Ishtalshiya. Well, yeah, the map of Seder Ishtalshius. The map of the lower worlds. Those four worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, which we're going to learn about in much greater length right after the break. Okay, but that being said, those levels of reality, those four worlds, Atzilus, a godly world, Bria, a metaphysical, spiritual world, right? What's there? Angels, Gan Eden Elyon, very lofty souls hang out there after they spent their time down here, right? Elam Yetzirah, 8 levels of angels. There's 2 levels of angels in Elam Bria, 8 levels of angels in Elam Yetzirah, a lower level, and that's what's there, Gan Eden Tachton, where your average everyday guy's soul goes once he leaves this world. Lower level Gan Eden. That's in a place called Elam Yetzirah, a place of great godly revelation, amazing place, unbelievable. Sit there and suntan in the radiance of the divine presence, right? Joe Biden on the beach in Delaware all day long. Wow, amazing. Okay. And then what? This world. What's unique about those 4 worlds? One thing. There's godly ore. Well, of course there's godly ore, because godly ore is the source of existence. What's also there that, so to speak, isn't above? Kalim. The expression of godly light in finitude. That doesn't exist anywhere else except in those 4 worlds. Okay, and so what's unique about those 4 worlds? Light clothed in vessels, which we've been talking about, right? This should ring true based on what we've been learning in this mimer. Okay, so that's shaykh to those 4 worlds. And Yud K Vav K, on a certain level, is the map of the godly light that's revealed in those 4 worlds. The Yud, that's Elam Atzilus. The K, that's Elam Bria. The Vav, that's Elam Yetzirah. The K Tata, the lower level K, Malchus, that's Elam Asiya, that's down here. Okay? And it's also the 10 spheres. Yud is Chachma, K is Bina, Vav is the 6 Midas, the 6 emotional attributes. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, those 6. That's Vav, 6. It's also drawing down from the upper level Hey, drawing down to the lower level K. What's that? That's Malchus. The 10th sphere, okay, which is the source of the next state of reality. Malchus in one world is always the source of the next world, right? Okay, so Malchus of Atzilus is what gives birth, so to speak, to the next world called Elam Bria. Malchus of Bria is the level of Bria that gives birth to the next level of reality. Malchus is femininity. Okay. All of that is Yud Kei Vav Kei Shaykh to the worlds. So what does it say in the verse? V Havaya. B'Tosefes Vav. With the additional Vav, meaning a level beyond Havaya. And Havaya. I mean, there's something in addition to Havaya, something beyond Havaya. That's the level that illuminates dark. We saw that in Tana Rabbana, and we're seeing it again here. Yeah? Seder? Havaya Yagia Chashki? No, right? Meaning what? That level of Havaya, what's that? That's the level of Shem Avad. It's the level of godly light that is ultimately responsible for the creation of a world where darkness is possible. Right? Not preferable, but possible. Right? Okay. So a level beyond that is the level of godly light that illuminates the dark and doesn't allow for the existence of dark. Seder Ishtalshelus is ultimately that level of reality that descends down and ends up expressing itself in this world, and there's something very unique about this world. This is a place where it's possible to assume that God doesn't exist. Is that true? That's absolute nonsense. But is it possible to live a life in this world based on that principle? Absolutely. Who lets that happen? God lets that happen. He created the world that way. God will give the person energy sitting at the typewriter, typing a 500-page book proving that God doesn't exist. Who's giving him the energy to do that every macrosecond while he's writing the book? God. If I were God, I would not. As he wrote the first letter, he would go up in a puff of smoke. You chutzpahdik creep! I'm gonna give you energy, and you're gonna write a letter about the fact that a book about the fact that I don't exist. End of him. No, the Eibishter is completely willing to let that happen. Right? He's not interested in that happening, but the world he created with all of that of Yud Kei Vav Kei being drawn down into the Kelim, and what name of God is the source of those Kelim? We learned it. No. Kelim, plurality, Elokim. Review the mimer and you'll know these things. It's up there too. Right? Elokim, that name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the source of plurality. God's not plural, God's one, but plurality can come out of him, so to speak. That's not really out of him. He allows for the apparent existence of something other than him. It's not an illusion, he created it. Okay. What aspect of Elokus is responsible for that? Bereshis bara Elokim. Plural, plurality, multiplicity. A name of God that denotes multiplicity. He's not multiple, he's one. Okay, say that. He allows for the existence of something that seems to be contrary to him. Okay. Concealment, choshech, darkness.
Could you explain what the Ve here means?
The Vav here, there's a place, when I say and, okay, so I say, and this cup. Okay, so what does that mean?
There's something beyond the
There's
cup.
something else. It might be lower, it might be higher, I don't know, but there's something other than the cup, because I just said, and the cup. Well, what and the cup? Well, the cup is not the only thing happening, that I know, because I just said, and the cup. Okay. So I don't know what else I'm talking about. Okay, that's fine, it's irrelevant to that, in that sense. But if you say, and Havaya Yagia Choshki, that means there's a level beyond Havaya that is that which illuminates the dark, a level beyond the natural order. And we learned already in our mind, there's two different levels of Shem Havaya. There's the level of Shem Havaya that is, so to speak, that is responsible, that is the godly light responsible for the existence of what you and I call the natural order. And there's a level beyond that.
So you're using this pasuk as a proof that is
more a source
that there's
than
something
proof.
above.
More a source than a proof,
Okay,
right?
okay.
I mean, yes, a proof relative to where we're coming from, but this is really the sort of, how do you and I know that? Well, because of this pasuk.
Okay.
It's not that I thought it up and then I bring the pasuk and say, aha, I was right. No, that's pshat in the pasuk. That there's something that Yud Kei Vav Kei is and. Well, what's before it, so to speak? A level beyond it. Very much in line with what we were saying about, God being the creator of the world. Did God create the world? Of course God created the world. Is that all he did? Well, no, actually that's one thought in his life. Machshava achas bara alma. One thought. All of time and all of space is contained in one thought of God. All of time that ever has been, all of time that ever will be, all of space that ever was, all of space that ever will be, meaning the ever-expanding universe that's somehow bending back into itself, whatever that means, okay? So that, all of that, all that ever was, that is, that will be, all of it is one thought in the life of the Eibishter. Okay? I guess he's pretty big, right? So then describing him as the creator of the world is true, but it's certainly not in any way, shape, or form comprehensive. It doesn't say everything about him. It says very little about him. Now, obviously, since you and I are the world, we sort of focus on that part of him, and we call him Bara Elam. And the Rebbe calls him the Bara Elam all the time. Rabbeinu Shalom, Bara Elam, the creator of the world, the master of the world. Okay, fine, that's definitely true. But that's in no way, shape, or form a comprehensive description of the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Okay, so there's levels beyond. And in order to illuminate that world, which theoretically could be a place of darkness, there's an amazing statement about Malchus, which is a level of godly reality. What does Chazal say about Malchus? that level of godly reality responsible for created reality, Ragleha yordos mavis. Wow. Her legs descend into death. Wow. There's a level of godly reality, and godliness is the ultimate in vitality and life, the source of it all, but not just the source of it all, the existential expression of existence. What exists? God, there's nothing that really exists. Okay. That's the third level we talked about. That existence can allow for the existence of something that is contrary to existence. Oh, it's called death, which is relevant to every single thing that happens down here. Ragleh yordes mavas. Whoa, what an image. And Ragleh is Malchus, the Eibishter. Right? Okay. How do you illuminate that place? By connecting to something transcendent of it and allowing for that to be revealed in it. Then you realize the true nature of that place. That the true nature of that place is that it's not bound by nature. And if you're completely stuck in nature and won't allow for anything beyond nature to exist, so then darkness is going to be part of that reality. Does that mean everything is dark and horrible and terrible? No, absolutely not. But will darkness be part of that reality? Yes, the natural order is that darkness is part of it. Physical darkness, but also metaphysical darkness. That's the nature of the world that the Eibishter created. The Eibishter created a world where the possibility of evil exists. There's only one creature in the world that can do that evil. That's called a human being. No other creature in the world can do something against the will of God. Only humans can. So it's not that God created evil. God created a world with this thing in it called a human, and those humans do things that are evil. What's that? Something against the will of God. We're the only thing that can do that. Why? Because we have this thing called intellect. No one else has that. So that must be the reason, huh? Right? Lions can't do anything against the will of God. That doesn't mean that I'm always happy that the lion catches the gazelle and eats it. We're always on the side of the gazelle when we watch them running through the African plains. It's usually a cheetah, right? Not a lion. Because lions, they're in packs, right? So it's one cheetah against 45 gazelles and Nebuch, that last gazelle, who evidently is not quite the healthiest one and can't run as fast. So the cheetah's running after it, and we're going, go gazelle, come on, man, run, the cheetah's going. And then the cheetah knocks out his back legs. How many times have we seen this on National Geographic specials, right? He knocks out the back legs, and the thing falls, and there's a lot of dust, and he gets up, and he starts running the other way, and now you know it's over. And then sooner or later, the cheetah's got him, and he grabs his neck, and he holds on until the thing dies, and then he grabs him, takes him under a tree. That's not evil. It's just lunch. He's going to eat him for the next week. And all the other gazelles can walk within a foot of that cheetah for the next week while he's got that gazelle rotting away. I don't know, he eats the meat on the fourth day in the 90-degree heat. But okay, I get that. He doesn't have intellect, so he doesn't care. You and I can also live that way if we didn't have intellect. It's only because of intellect that we need air conditioning, which causes a lot of problems because it makes it much harder to make a living as a human than as a cheetah. You need a house, you need clothes, you need a car, you need air conditioning, you got to have an iPhone, and if not, so Nebuch, you have to make do with an Android. Chas v'shalom. My kids make fun of my Android all the time. I'm just not as rich as my kids, so I can't afford an iPhone. I don't know how they got so rich, my kids. Right, okay. Right? All that whole reality of Olam Hazeh comes from the Eibishter, and the Eibishter created a place where there's this thing called a human which can actually do something against his will and therefore can bring about a state of absolute darkness. What illuminates it? Not nature. That's not the way to illuminate dark. Connect to something beyond nature, and I can illuminate the dark. That's Hanukkah. Let's go a little further. Or zeh, this light. Shalamaylim yishtashlus is beyond the yishtashlus. Nimshach, how do you draw down that light? This is all a review of Tana Rabbanan. Nimshach hayidei Mesiras Nefesh the Matasiyahu Banav. Was drawn down through the Mesiras Nefesh, the self-sacrifice of Matasiyahu and Banav. And we know that self-sacrifice came from where? From Etzem and Neshama, from the essence of their soul, which is the third level. So what are those other two levels doing in this equation of Hanukkah? Hanukkah is all about that third level. The Milchama is all about that third level. Why did they go to war? That third level of connection to the essence of God. That's why they went to war. They went to war because they were sensitive to the fact that within the context of their struggles with Eilam Hazeh, they could somehow connect to Elokus. Yehuda Tata? No. If you're living on the level of Yehuda Tata, there's a Greek. And what might be the best way to deal with the Greek? Stay away. Do your best to just stay away. You're going to take the Greek head on? Whoa. If you're going to take the Greek head on within the context of Yehuda Tata, you might lose. Right? You can, on that level, you can lose. And if you lose, it's worse than if you hadn't fought at all. So the only way to beat the Greek, and this is Tana Rabbanan, is by coming to a point where you are connected to something so powerful that there is no Greek there. There's nothing that's not the Eibishter in that place, and so you can even illuminate the darkest thing. So relative to the Greek, you can defeat the Greek and reestablish the base of Mikdash, and reestablish and light the menorah, and have a miracle that the menorah completely transcends nature with this incredible miracle of oil that's supposed to last one day, lasts 8 days. And it's an 8-day holiday to express that idea, the level completely and totally beyond the natural order. That's the only way you can beat the Greek. You're going to go convince the Greek? Go convince the Greek that he really should be a nice guy. Where do you see that today?
Anti-Semitism, all this stuff.
Right. Go convince the Hamasnik that he should really be a nice guy. Let's talk about it. Let's go talk with the Iranians. Let's go talk about it. We'll treat you nice, you treat us nice. They laugh at you. They make a fool of you, which is what they've done for the last 4 years. Right? I mean, they were broke 4 years ago. Right? And now they've got hundreds of billions. What was the first thing they did? Oh, let's give them some money and they'll probably behave. No, that's not the way to deal with that reality. You can't deal with evil that way. You can't talk to evil. Now, you might not be able to destroy it, so you do your best to avoid it, but you can't convince evil not to be evil. Don't be ridiculous. Neville Chamberlain, waving the piece of paper. Wrong way to do it. Drop a bomb and carpet bomb Dresden and maybe it'll work. Now they did that at the end of the war. The war was over, but okay. That's not that, you can't do that today. No one reported it. Okay, but that's the way you deal with that. It's the only way to deal with that state of reality, right? You can't make deals with it because it's just not. It doesn't think the way you think. Okay, so you have to somehow destroy it. Now, how do you go about doing that? I don't know. In real politic terms, so that's a separate issue. When you're talking about Elokus, how do you destroy it? You're so connected to Elokus that basically that whole reality doesn't even exist. And then you can defeat it. And that's Hanukkah. That's the whole story of Hanukkah. That's the Chashmonaim. Okay, the Rebbe is now going to explain how we did that from below above and above below. We'll see that tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.